Uh, what about the language? We can speak either English or Spanish. Is that okay? Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
All right.
Any language you like.
Buenas tardes, empezamos en unos segundos. Por favor, si podemos todos apagar nuestros micrófonos. Tu señal, Andrea. Listo. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Este es nuestro último panel o conferencia del segundo día de la jornada de la Traducción 2020, organizada por el CEMELTI, el Colegio Mexicano de Licenciados en Traducción e Interpretación. Nuestro panel de este momento es AmeriVox y tenemos ya listas a nuestras panelistas. Se va a participar tanto en inglés como en español. Les recordamos a todos los asistentes que contamos con el servicio de interpretación de lenguas. Si alguien tiene problemas para encontrarlo o para saber cómo funciona, nos pueden preguntar por el chat y los vamos apoyando los moderadores de este panel. Aprovechamos la ocasión también para agradecer y recordar que se está haciendo una campaña a nivel mundial de visibilización del intérprete o traductor o mediador lingüístico y que el CEMELTI se suma enfáticamente a esto. Muchas gracias una vez más, bienvenidos y muchas gracias a AmeriVox. Thank you very much, AmeriVox. If you can please proceed to introduce yourselves and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting us as well. Thank you, Melissa. I was just starting to speak while you showed our main screen. So we are the AmeriVox panel. There are 6 of us. We'll be introducing ourselves in a minute now. And yeah, we've formed this group called AmeriVox. I don't know if somebody else has something they wanted to say about AmeriVox before we introduce ourselves.
Have you heard of us? Just kidding.
we are quite new.
Yes, we are new, so that's a good question.
Okay, so how about we go to the next slide and we can all introduce ourselves. And since I'm speaking, I might as well start. My name is Chrissy Michaud. I've been an interpreter now for 15 years. I actually started studying in translation, and when I was in my last year in my 4-year program in written translation, one of the teachers that I had who also worked with interpretation, she came to see me at one point after class and she said, listen, you should really do the master's in interpretation, because she said, I've been teaching you for a few months and I can tell that if you become a translator, you will hate your life. So I'm not quite sure what it was about it. I don't think I have the personality to be a translator because I don't have perhaps that much attention to detail. And I'm not necessarily a purist when it comes to languages. I'm more of a communicator. So I applied and I passed the entrance exam and I took the master's, and voila, I've been in the booth since then and I absolutely love it. My working languages, well, French is my first language, English is my B, and I'm working on adding Spanish as a C. I in fact lived in Mexico City all of 2010. And I absolutely loved it. I love the city. I hope to go back again soon. And but yeah, that is how I became an interpreter. So yeah, and I work for the government of Canada here bilingually, French and English. So somebody else now.
Okay, I can go. So I'm Patricia from Brazil. I'm from the Brazilian part of AmeriVox here. There are three Brazilians. And I also started with written translation. Three Brazilians because Mel is a honorable Brazilian. I mean, she's American, but we've taken her for us. And anyway, I started with translation, and I did a bachelor's degree in translation and started working with that. And naturally, interpretation came, and I live in a region of Brazil where interpreting courses are not available whatsoever. And we are talking about early 2000s here, so there were no online courses available. And I actually started interpreting as many people do in the region where I live, just by doing it. But 1 year in, I realized I had to study that and started looking for which courses were possible for me to take. And pretty much these were 1 week long courses or short-term 2 week long courses. And that's when I started practicing on my own or with friends because we did have internet back in that time, so we could practice with friends, but I couldn't take like a formal interpreting course, which only happened maybe 5 years later. It did happen finally. It was possible, and that's it. I work a lot with technical interpreting auditings and things like this, and I really like it. That's pretty much it.
Okay, I'll go next. My name is Danielle Fonseca. I'm also from Brazil. I'm a Portuguese A, English B, Spanish C. And like many translators and interpreters, I did not graduate in translation or interpreting initially. I graduated in electrical engineering. Then I decided that I wanted the academic life. Then had my master's in biomedical engineering. And when I was 6 months into the PhD program, I had an invitation to work for a month as a liaison interpreter, and I just loved it. Loved it. I said, wow, this is a career. I'm paid to talk. This is what I want to do. So I quit the PhD program, started working only with written translation, liaison interpreting, and consecutive interpreting. Did that for about 5 years. Then I realized that I had this glass ceiling that in order for me to grow professionally, I needed to study conference interpreting. So I studied in Sao Paulo for 2 years, and I've been working in interpreting ever since. That was 20 years ago.
Vivi, I'm going to be the teacher and designate. I see you on screen. Te toca.
Ok, yo voy a hablar en español. ¿Qué tal? Mi nombre es Viviana Tipiani de Lima, Perú. Y bueno, a ver, eh, yo también tengo ya casi 20 años de experiencia en el mercado como intérprete y como traductora. De hecho, estudié la carrera aquí en Lima, en la UNIFE, hace muchos años atrás, pero probablemente no fue este el momento en el que sentí como el llamado, ¿no? El decir, esto es lo que quiero hacer. Y yo creo que muchas personas a veces tienen esos momentos, ¿no? En los que a veces muy temprano, muy jóvenes, ya saben lo que quieren hacer. Otros de repente, como nos comentaba Daniele, es como, bueno, lo descubres en algún momento o sabes que lo quieres, como también Patricia nos comentó. Pero en mi caso, yo estudié la carrera y no estaba todavía muy segura de que quería seguir ese camino. Y decidí viajar. Me fui a Alemania a estudiar alemán, porque ¿por qué no? Igual, me gustaban los idiomas. Y fue ahí, en algún momento, en donde yo digo que me llegó la iluminación, porque literalmente eso fue lo que sentí, fue una luz del llamado, porque estuve ayudando en un trabajo voluntario para el primer Foro Social Europeo. Y era una locura y un caos, y habían llamado a profesionales y a personas que supieran hablar diferentes idiomas para participar. Y fue impresionante, simplemente a partir de ese momento, ver lo que era ese tipo de eventos grandes en donde podía estar compartiendo una cabina con alguien que trabajaba para el Parlamento Europeo, para la comunidad en ese entonces, y poder compartir con esa persona y que ver realmente cuál era el trabajo real del intérprete in situ, ¿no? Y fue ahí donde dije, no, esto es lo que quiero hacer, mucho más probablemente que la traducción, y desde ese momento empecé poco a poco a cultivar vínculos, relaciones, muy buenos amigos, colegas que fueron también muy amables en compartir mucho de lo que sabían, de su experiencia de vida y profesional. Y probablemente a partir de ese momento es donde empiezo también a creer mucho en la colaboración y el trabajo real en equipo y en lo que realmente es el apoyo entre colegas. Entonces, quizás la iluminación llegó a ese punto de decir quiero ser intérprete, pero también quiero estar en esa profesión que es tan maravillosa y que probablemente a mí como a todos mis colegas y de AmeriVox y en general, a probablemente todos los intérpretes es lo que más les apasiona. Así que esa es un poco la historia, ¿no? Y de ahí ya muchos años hasta ahora y ahora aquí en casa nuevamente en Lima. No sé si, a ver, Daniel, para continuar quizás con el español, para ayudar a los intérpretes.
Sí, gracias. Justo eso iba a decir y luego cerramos con broche de oro las presentaciones con Melissa. Y bueno, buenas tardes, buenos días y buenas noches, depende de dónde nos estén escuchando. Gracias por estar acá conectados. Ha sido un día bastante largo, trataremos de no aburrirlos. En todo caso, yo trataré de no aburrirlas. Mi nombre es Daniel Aparicio, soy también uno del equipo que fue de los organizadores de AmeriVox. Y bueno, yo creo que soy el bebé de los 6, porque ustedes dicen que tienen 20 años, yo no tengo tantos años de experiencia, soy el más bebé, el poco más inexperimentado. Se han dado cuenta, yo también soy peruano, estudié traducción e interpretación en la universidad y bueno, luego me di cuenta que si bien me gusta la traducción, pero creo que más lo mío es la interpretación y la docencia, y he estado metido en interpretación y en docencia como los últimos 10 años aproximadamente, y siempre he estado queriendo de repente romper lo normal, ¿no? Y justo ya lo contaremos más en detalle, ¿no? Pero nos juntamos bueno, tengo español como lengua A, inglés como B y francés como C. Y creo que fue una idea de todos crear AmeriVox porque es un espacio necesario, que veíamos necesario desde todas las perspectivas, ¿no? Básicamente estoy en Perú, estoy en Perú, básicamente, y no sé qué más contarles, no quiero tomar mucho tiempo tampoco, ¿no? Entonces, Mel.
Okay. So my name is Melissa Mann, and I've been translating and interpreting for 20 years. I love translating. I guess I'm one of those few interpreters that loves it. If it sounds like there's a dial-up modem in the background, it's because there are lots of crickets out where I live, and it's cricket season, cicada season. So I don't know if it sounds like there's a dial-up modem, which is about the time I started translating and interpreting. And let's see, I started translating and interpreting when I lived in Mexico City. So I lived there from 2000 to 2005, and I kind of trained on the job. Probably shouldn't tell that to my clients at the time, but that's what I did. And fell in love with I ended up starting with translation and then moving into interpreting after about 2 years, and just fell in love with it. Took one course after another, but not not anything in the official capacity. I've been living in Brazil for 15 years now, and I finally decided to go get my master's in this. So I just started at Glendon. So I placed into the second year, and end of next year, if I pass my exams, I will have a master's in conference interpreting. That's it. I don't have anything else to add.
All right, thank you. Actually, does somebody who was one of the first to start AmeriVox, does somebody want to start explaining how the idea came together before we explain the format and how it works?
Well, actually, Danny and I, we did a deliberate practice session for PIPS. Was it PIPS or
IBPG maybe, can't remember.
Either one of them. In the beginning of the pandemic, Danny and I were getting together to practice online in these groups. And the first practice, she called me, she invited me in. And when we finished, I called her. We are very good friends. In addition to being colleagues, right? I called her and I said, you know, we are going to do this here, right? Because she's a trainer. I mean, she's trained me. She has a course called Boot Camp. It's a program which happens once a year. I've taken it twice, and she didn't accept me for the third round. So I just called her and said, okay, we're going to do this. And she said, no, it's going to be so much work. We're not going to do it. Okay. A few weeks later, Melissa calls her. You know, we're going to do this. And she's like, no, it's too much work. We're not going to do this. And Melissa's like, yes, we're going to do this.
Yeah, but Melissa's American. Melissa's American and she doesn't mince words. So she said, we're going to do this.
Yes, we're going to do this. Like she means it. And then Danielle does the same thing a few weeks later. You know, Dani, we can do this. And she's like, no, it's going to be so complicated. And then she got convinced with all these people telling her that we were going to do it. And then we started thinking about other people to call, because we wanted to have like an array of people from different countries. And then the idea of working with the 4 languages that are most spoken in the Americas started taking shape and things like that. So Danielle actually knew Vivi. Danielle did know Melissa and Donnie from CoLab, and he also took a course, like a weekend-long course with me for AIC here in Brazil. So he kind of knew the 3 of us. We know each other.
And Chrissy,
like,
yeah.
And then we needed someone for French. I'm getting to Chrissy. We needed someone for French. And then Danielle, Melissa, and Donnie had done collab the year before, I think, in Mexico. And they met Chrissy. And Danny said, oh, I have this perfect person for the French. And that's how Chrissy came to join the group. So that's pretty much how it happened. And then we sat down and started discussing. Melissa has very, very crazy ideas. It took me about a week to understand what she was proposing for the session itself, because I was like, but how can people speak the 4 languages at the same time and this? And it's like, it took me a while to understand her brain. You know, her brain should come like with captions, just, you know. But anyway, we started talking, and then we made it, right? Against all the odds, right, Dani?
So
Yeah.
talking about how it started, what is it? Perhaps we can go to the next slide, and you might have, yes, we are a wonderfully crazy team. You might have figured out by now, because we have referenced PIPS and IBPG, that we are an interpreter's deliberate practice group. So We have had 2 sessions now. We have them on the 4th Saturday of every month. We had one on September 26th, actually. We're just recovering from that one before we prepare the October session. So once a month, we all get together and we invite as many interpreters or interpreting students as we can to join us to practice for 3 to 4 hours, but it's only really 4 20-minute speeches. So it usually, and we use the Sao Paulo time just because it's time zones are complicated. I don't know if you've gotten mixed up with your time zone since COVID started and you're trying to listen to something that's streaming from Paris or something, but I have had so many issues with time zones. So we decided we're just going to use Sao Paulo time. So every 4th Saturday at 10:45 a.m. Sao Paulo time, we start our session. The last 2, we've had about 140 participants each time. So we start with announcements and letting people into the session, because letting in 140 people takes a lot of time, because we check against the list just to make sure that only registered participants are let in. So we announce how it works. We tell, and it's all on Zoom, so interpreters join, and we have the few announcements, and then the speeches begin. So we have 4 speeches, and I will let Viviana and Danielle explain how the relay works, because this is a very interesting feature of ours. But we have 1 speech in each language, so all 4 major, and I say major languages of the Americas, because we know that there's all the hundreds, if not thousands, of indigenous languages, but we work with the 4 main languages. So there's 1 speech in English, 1 in French, 1 in Spanish, and 1 in Portuguese. So we invite speakers from all over the world, and we usually choose 1 theme for the session. And each speaker speaks, we let them choose what they want to speak about exactly, but it has to be relevant to the theme. Like one of our first session was on tourism, and our last session was on gender issues. And we've had such a great array of speakers. It's fantastic. So we have 2 of the 20-minute speeches happen more or less back to back. There is a 5-minute break in between, during which we hear fantastic music. You'll hear about our Spotify list that Melissa has curated. And then there's a 20-minute silent session for personal feedback, because even if there's 140 people in a Zoom meeting, we obviously can't all do feedback at the same time. So interpretation works in pairs. So our participants come in pairs, or if somebody else will talk more about this later, but then everybody puts their Zoom on mute, and then they can use their phone, and for example, on WhatsApp or Skype or another mode of communication, they do feedback. So let's say I've been practicing with Vivi, and she listened to me work. Then while the Zoom is on mute, we can talk on Skype, and she can tell me, listen, maybe you can try working on your lag, or on some other, something else that she noticed I might need to work on. And then we have speeches 3 and 4, and then more feedback. And then at the end of it, we just talk about what we heard. And discussion does tend to revolve a little bit about a little bit around the interpretation experience and what people thought of the speeches and so on. But we also sometimes talk about the topics that were discussed during the speeches. And it's a very interesting session. The speeches, I can't stop saying enough about the speeches, because we don't just choose just random YouTube videos like I do personally when I practice on my own. We invite great speakers, and we've really been impressed by the speeches that we've had. So I'll let Viviana and Danielle now explain a little bit more about the format.
Ok, muchas gracias, Crisi. Sí, quizás retomando un poco y para enfatizar el mensaje final de Crisi, lo importante es que intentamos tener un balance entre las personas que van a presentar, los oradores, por un lado expertos y por otro lado también voluntarios, intérpretes que quieren mejorar sus habilidades de oratoria y que voluntariamente quieren hablar sobre el tema de la sesión. Entonces, tenemos el tema de la sesión, tenemos oradores, ya sea 2 o si podemos, si tenemos suerte, conseguimos a algún otro tercer experto sobre el tema en cuestión, y tenemos luego la práctica misma. ¿Y qué es lo que la hace realmente especial? Es que podemos usar la aplicación de interpretación de Zoom. Es probablemente una de las prácticas que tiene esta idea brillante que viene también de Melissa, de tener interpretación simultánea de todos los discursos. Lo que permite, por ejemplo, que alguien que no hable portugués pueda participar y escuchar todos los discursos, hasta el discurso en portugués, pero a través del intérprete. En este caso, por ejemplo, en mi caso, digamos, yo no sé hablar portugués, entonces yo estoy participando en la práctica, lo que voy a hacer es, empieza a hablar el orador de portugués, voy entonces a la opción de interpretación de Zoom, escojo español y del español, por ejemplo, practico al inglés, si quiero usar o practicar mi lengua B. ¿No? Esa es una probablemente de las cosas que a veces todavía nos cuesta a los participantes entender
No me acuerdo.
que uno puede ir como participante a practicar no solamente los idiomas que nosotros ofrecemos como idiomas de discursos, inglés, francés, español y portugués, sino que, por ejemplo, puede venir a alguien que quiere practicar alemán con un compañero, por ejemplo, que habla también alemán y va a escuchar a través, ya sea el discurso directamente del orador o a través del intérprete. Y los intérpretes voluntarios son para nosotros nuestros superhéroes, son los que realmente nos apoyan porque gracias a ellos es que se permite a todo el mundo practicar en diferentes idiomas a la vez y no tener que elegir solamente un discurso u otro si no se habla el idioma de la sala principal en Zoom. Entonces, eso es...
Maybe if Mel
Sí,
changes the slide, it's going to be
sí,
easier for you
ok,
to explain
perfecto.
that. Yeah.
Sí, muchas gracias.
Right, you
Gracias.
wouldn't know that I'm the one that's running the tech for this, would you? I can't even change slides.
Nada, es que no estamos en el modo práctica. Cuando estamos en el modo práctica tampoco, no saben lo que sucede realmente tras bambalinas. Mel es realmente nuestro ángel de la guarda en muchos aspectos técnicos. Pero básicamente es eso. Lo que un poco les estaba explicando, tenemos entonces los 4 idiomas y el relé con ¿no? Los relés de los oficialmente los 4 idiomas de la región y la práctica la hacen quien esté participando en sala desde cualquiera de los idiomas o desde el piso, como normalmente estaríamos acostumbrados. Y claro, a veces suena un poco extraño cuando uno lo dice y complicado porque no te lo puedes imaginar, ¿no? Pero en realidad cuando uno ve en la misma sesión es magia pura, ¿no? Es impresionante y tenemos muy buenos intérpretes voluntarios que nos acompañan, que sin ellos realmente toda esta locura de organización, ¿no? Toda esta medio reunión de Naciones Unidas para una práctica de interpretación pueda funcionar correctamente y por eso les estamos súper agradecidos. Daniel, no sé si quieres agregar algo.
Dios mío, ¿qué más puedo agregar, mujer, si tú ya lo has dicho todo? Te pasaste. Habíamos quedado en algo, Viviana Tipiani, te pasas.
No me acuerdo
Pero
de nada, que me puse
yo
nerviosa y
tampoco.
empecé a hablar como una loca para siempre. Quítame el micro nomás. Tienes que quitármelo, aprender a quitarlo.
Pero sí, solamente me gustaría resaltar que es más una organización de los Estados Americanos que Naciones Unidas por los idiomas que manejamos y definitivamente esto no sería posible sin el apoyo, porque bueno, la práctica es gratuita, todo el trabajo que se hace es voluntario y esto no hubiese sido posible sin el apoyo de los voluntarios, tanto de intérpretes de relé voluntarios como oradores voluntarios, ¿no? Porque hay que buscarlos, hay que encontrarlos, ¿no? Y es simpático también tener este plus en comparación a los otros grupos de práctica. Hay grupos de práctica creo que en Toronto, en París, en Bruselas, en Londres, pero la novedad, entre comillas, la novedad o lo que nos caracteriza es esta complejidad de tener los 4 idiomas, ¿no? Y mucha gente, cuando por ahí pasamos la voz, hacemos la promoción de la práctica, al menos personalmente yo digo, no, pero yo solamente quiero, pero yo no entiendo portugués, pero no importa, tú entiendes inglés, coge todos los discursos desde el inglés y lo interpretas hacia el francés. Ah, qué interesante. Y como dijo Viviana al principio, suena medio complejo, pero, pero luego cuando uno pasa la primera experiencia, la primera vez con nosotros, ya uno no lo deja, no se olvida esa primera vez. Y ya está. Siguiente diapositiva. Mel, no te olvides de
Sí,
cambiar la diapositiva.
sí, y es Melissa ahora que puede explicarnos cómo funciona todo.
Okay, so when we were kind of working out the logic of it, it was very important that we always have everybody able to understand everything all the time. That was it. That was the premise. We want everybody to understand everything all the time. I mean, assuming you speak one of these 4 languages, you understand one of these 4 languages. So you've got to speak one of them. So basically, I set it up like a puzzle, and the easiest part actually are the speeches. The speeches have just a speech in one language and outgoing relay into 3 other languages. Pretty straightforward. The conversations, however, the conversations are open and anyone can speak in any one of the 4 languages, just one at a time. So in order to do that, you actually have to have a set of bilingual interpreters who follow a very strict set of rules, whereby you only interpret between your 2 assigned languages at any given time. If another language is on the floor and you understand it or don't, you don't talk. And you have to turn on your mic and off your mic really quickly. So we have 6 interpreters and they all know what they do. So we've got one who's just French, Portuguese, French, Spanish, French, English. And then we've got, I can't think of all the combinations right now because it's too complex, but they all have to be very cognizant of who's on the floor. So unlike what happens sometimes in the Americas, where you may understand other languages and you don't need relay to do interpreting, or you may go into English from Spanish and Portuguese, say, you can't do that here because you'll have interference. So we set this up, we have a practice run, and it only works because we've all set up our roles ahead of time. We practice, we tweak it because we realize, no, there's a problem here, there's a problem there. We run mic checks. And if it's too chaotic, we actually will stop things and say, guys, turn off your mic, do this if it's too chaotic. We have people running tech in the room to make sure that we don't have 70 people talking at the same time or 15 people with their mics on. Inevitably, this happens, but we do our best. So everyone's got a very strict role so that, again, we can have our main objective, we can reach our main objective, which is everybody can understand everything all the time and participate in any of the 4 languages, however they feel inspired. And the other neat thing is right now I'm talking to you in English, but if I feel so inspired, pues les puedo hablar en español, and Daniel can start talking in English, and Dani can start hablando en portugués, si así lo quiere, y no hay ningún problema. Y asimismo, también en el medio de la frase uno puede cambiar su idioma, no es lo que aconsejamos porque
Los intérpretes te van a odiar.
sí, los intérpretes nos quieren matar, pero sí es posible porque ya saben exactamente cómo hacerlo, qué necesitan hacer, y en el medio de la frase, el que tiene que interpretar empieza a hablar y mutea el micrófono o enciende usa el micrófono o lo que sea, pero ya todos saben exactamente qué hacer para que todos puedan entender todo en todo el tiempo, en todo momento. So that's it.
Yeah, but just not to get people scared. When we talk about the interpreters do this and the interpreters do that, and there are those interpreters who go bi-directionally and so on, we are talking about the 18 interpreters that we invite to be our interpreters to allow these to happen. It's not participants. We use these different names to get them apart. So if you want to join our session, you'll be a participant. You do not need to go into this complicated thing that Mel has just explained. You just work with a partner, as it was explained before, in a back channel, in another communication system, in another device. Could be Skype, could be WhatsApp, could be Whereby, could be anything. So your voice in your practice is not going to go into Zoom. You just listen to the speeches in the original language or in the language that they were interpreted to through Zoom.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. That is correct. We have when I refer to the interpreters, I refer to our assigned, designated, official interpreters, and not to the participants who are also all interpreters. Some are interpreting students, and some are people who just want to figure out what interpreting is all about. So they come and visit, and then of course they decide they want to become interpreters.
So in 10 years, we'll have people telling the story of how they became an interpreter. I heard about AmeriVox. But yeah, this slide was just to explain how much work goes into this, how much organization it takes. And probably Melissa didn't want to talk about herself too much, but she is fantastic. She does all of the tech. She shares the slides. She gets the music going, and I don't think we could do it without her. So it's a lot of work. We're on WhatsApp texting each other at the same time. It was like, somebody's missing, we need to get this person. And like, we might appear, as we are in the booth as interpreters, we might appear very calm, but behind the scenes we're running around and everything's kind of crazy. But I think we can go to the next slide.
We can, but I'm just going to jump in while we
Yes.
talk about that. So yes, right now I'm running tech, and right now other people are assigning interpreters, the assigned interpreters, and other people are checking the chat, and other people are running the conversation. But the truth is we've got scripts for all of this. And just like the people who have come to practice at AmeriVox are learning and will be able to, will progress in their studies, we also are switch roles because we've set up these scripts. So the idea is that I won't always run tech or the music, and maybe I'll actually talk at one of the, because I don't like to talk at the meetings, or somebody else will run the music. This week, Daniele decided to be the person who assigns the interpreters. So we do switch these roles around because we too want to learn.
Okay, so in the interpreting world, no person is an island. Bring a partner or we'll get you one. Well, this is a slide to talk a little bit about pairing, right? So we open sign-ups and everybody signs up. Sometimes they do bring a partner and sometimes they don't. Actually, most of the time they don't. It's maybe 40 to 60%, right, Dani? 40% of the people have a partner from the get-go, and the other six,
Yeah, I guess
something like
so.
this. I'm
Yeah,
just
something like that.
inventing percentages here, but it's something like that. Okay, more people come without a partner than with one, and then after that we have to get all of the pairs, uh, the language pairs people work with, and try to pair them up, which is extremely difficult. Sometimes people don't know, people have no A language, for instance. This has happened. So we need to, sometimes Dani is the one who actually does the hard work here, and sometimes she needs to call to text people or email people to try to figure out how to do the best pairing. And the idea is people who are paired up together, they need to have one common language, an A or a B, because they need to be able to talk, right? So that's pretty much the most important premise, I would say, right? So once sign up is closed, we have a couple of days to do this pairing because we need to send emails out so that partners can talk to one another, because often these people don't know who their partner is, and they need to set up their goals for the practice, right? So if I'm partnered up with someone with Portuguese C and I'm a Portuguese A, what does this person want me to assess or check on his Portuguese C or something like this? So this conversation needs to happen before practice, and that's why we need to do the pairing quite fast, right? Like we have 2 days to pair up like 140 people or something like that. But if you come with a partner, a colleague, a friend, you know for sure that the person will be there, right? Or if not, the person will try to find a replacement or something like this, because you have agreed to practice together on a Saturday morning for Brazil time. If you are partnered up with someone you don't know, you may run the risk of being ditched before the prom, you know, and it does happen. In this last session, what we tried to do is to implement the lost sheep room. So if people have been abandoned by their partner, they're sent to this room right in the beginning when we are making the announcements, and we tried to pair them up, repair them, right? No pun intended. And that's pretty much it. It's an exhaustive job. I do very little of it. I just look, and once Dani is done, she says, "Can you take a look and see if I messed up if with the pairing?" I was like, "Yeah, that I can do," but she does the hard work. And 1 day, 1 hour before the practice, we are still trying to repair people. So it's pretty tense, but it's nice. There's an advantage of practicing with someone you know. So when you come with a colleague, this person generally knows you. But there's also an advantage of being paired up with someone that you don't know really, because you don't know what school this person studied in, what kind of feedback this person is able to give you. So there are pros and cons in both approaches. So you just have to see what works best for you, right? That's pretty much it. Anybody would like to add anything uh, regarding pairing? Donnie, you're the Cupid.
Yeah, people are usually concerned with the language combinations, and it may sound complicated, of course, but if you have one common language that you speak, that you can give and receive feedback using that language, it is enough. And maybe even in this combination that Patricia mentioned, suppose that I'm an A in Portuguese and someone else is a C in Portuguese, and some people look at that combination sometimes with the partner that they were assigned to and say, what can a C Portuguese tell me? Well, they can tell you a lot, because feedback in interpreting is not just about your choice of words or your correctness in grammar. There are many extra linguistic aspects that go into interpreting. So you can learn a lot even from people who are C in the language that you're an A. So it's nice because you can, if you're open to a new experience, being allowed to be paired up with a stranger, so to speak, could be a very rewarding experience, because people who don't come from the same background you come from may give you a different perspective on your practice and may give you an interesting feedback. So pros and cons, as Patricia said, and maybe sometimes you come with a partner that you work too often with, and the person is so used to working with you that they might not realize a few points that you could improve in. So again, pros and cons, but as long as people are open to that, and preferably that they don't ditch their partners, because that is of course not nice, then yeah, it's hard work, but it is possible.
Y yo creo que quizás una de las recomendaciones que les daría a las personas que están en sala y que tienen la curiosidad y que todavía no entienden muy bien, es que quizás se inscriban una primera vez con alguien que conocen, con un colega que ya, eh, con el que ya tienen confianza y simplemente para probar la experiencia, porque como menciona Olivia, yo creo que es igual o hasta más enriquecedor tener a otro colega con una, como decía Daniela, una perspectiva completamente diferente. Pero claro, de repente primero uno necesita la seguridad de entender cómo funciona todo y luego poco a poco ya vas explorando nuevos horizontes y te vas a dar cuenta que es muy enriquecedor como profesional escuchar los comentarios, sugerencias de técnicas de otros compañeros también, de otras partes del mundo, que es lo que vemos en el mapa, ¿no? Es muy genial, creo yo, la experiencia para todos. Tanto así que yo ya quiero salirme y practicar en vez de estar organizando o moderando el chat.
Muchas gracias, Viviana. Muchas gracias a todos. Thank you very much. Any last message you want to send, guys? Or we're very short of time. It's
Well,
almost time.
if we can, I'd just like to very briefly talk about what deliberate practice is, because we've been talking about we are a group of deliberate practice, but maybe some people are not familiar with the concept. It's simply finding a partner. In our case, usually it could be a teacher or a coach, somebody like that. Then you assess yourself, define a specific goal, and when you go to practice, you practice with one, at the most two goals in mind, and then you get feedback from your partner. Can you change the next slide, please, Mel? But you might wonder, so how do I know if I haven't got my feedback yet? How do I know what I need to improve in? So the first thing that any interpreter should do is to record yourself at any time. Just do that, and do it often during your entire career. Because when you listen to yourself, you will probably detect a few things that bother you, so probably bother your audience as well. And you can use those things to determine as your next goal. Next slide, please. Usually, if you don't like what you want, what you hear, then you can use that as a goal. It could be the pace that you use. It could be pauses that sound off, or maybe feelers, or people who say while they're thinking. So things that really bother us, and any interpreter usually has that. And just move to the next one. We had set aside a few funny stories to tell you that relate to that. We thought that we had a little bit longer, but if we need to wrap up.
No, we really don't need to. I'm sorry. Just a quick announcement. Chicos, nuestros asistentes, vamos a extender un poquito la sesión para que podamos abarcar más temas que estaban preparados. Si ya no pueden acompañarnos en vivo, esta sesión también se está transmitiendo por Facebook y se va a seguir transmitiendo y va a quedar registrada para quien tenga que irse ahora, pueda seguirla más tarde y pueda terminar de verla más tarde con toda la calma del mundo. Y también quizá el equipo de AmeriVox nos proporcione algún dato de contacto para que puedan después dar seguimiento por si ya no alcanzan a preguntar en vivo.
Yes, we have.
So,
yeah, we can just leave this as our contact information on the screen while we share some stories. So who wants to go first, Chrissy?
Before we share stories, I just want to shout out. I think I see Yuri Garcia in the room. She saved our butts the very first session when our interpreter, our officially assigned interpreter into Spanish, just disappeared. And I said, hey, you want to do it? And she jumped right into the booth and did a phenomenal job. We loved it. And we invited her back for the last session. So if you, sorry, Yuri, I hope you don't mind, but if you guys want to find out what it's like on the ground in the practice session, she might be a great person to ask.
Right. So, funny stories, just because we thought we didn't, the last panel of the day is always the most difficult one because people are usually tired. So we were trying to make it a little bit more entertaining. And yes, it is interesting to learn about what exactly deliberate practice is and why it's important. And Daniele, if you want, could tell you all about it in a 1 hour presentation herself, I'm sure. But we thought it would be funny as well to explain, to give examples of why it is important to do deliberate practice and to tell stories of war stories, if you will, from when we were in the booth and where things didn't quite go as planned. And the funny one I have to tell is, so we were interpreting from French into English, which are my main languages, and I was not at the mic, but I still have to tell the story because it was quite good. In French, well, they were talking about printers and just how just mass printing of documents in a world where paper used to dominate and not just electronically. And so all the print jobs were done automatically, but if ever there was a paper jam or an issue, and they were speaking in French, but it kind of works in Spanish as well. But they said something along the lines of, si hay algún problema, tenemos que ir a ver a la secretaria para pedirle que haga un trabajo de impresa, un trabajo de imprenta manual. And my colleague in English decided to say, because I guess he was tired, and decided to say, well, you need to go see the secretary and ask for a hand job instead of saying an automatic job. And then, as he said that, he just stopped at the booth, and the third colleague, both his hands shot up in the air, and we were all, anyway, it was pretty funny. Because in English, it is normal to say hand when something is handmade instead of saying manual, because Latin languages, we do use manuel more, sorry. But in English, just because they tend to simplify things a bit more, we tend to say handmade, or this was hand, blah, blah, blah. So the person just said hand job without necessarily realizing the sexual connotation. So we all had a good laugh about that. But this is one example of a good reason why you should do deliberate practice. I think Patricia has another funny story, a little different, but another good reason why one should practice.
Okay, as I mentioned in the beginning, guys, I'm far from the Rio, Sao Paulo schools and everything, so practice has always been something that I do a lot on my own. And a habit I have is with consecutive, because consecutive is something you learn and then you don't use it so much when you're actually working. And you might get rusty, right? So once a week, I sit down to watch the news, and I do consecutive of the news, the whole shebang, you know. And then after it's finished, I go through my notes and I try to retell the stories. I just do that for myself. Then one day I'm doing some whispering, uh, interpreting in a board meeting just for the CEO, and two directors start a fight, like a fist fight, like they start hitting each other, you know. And I was like, oh my god. And they're shouting things here and there. You are this, you're that, your mother is that. I said, no, my mother's not that. And I just got my notepad and started taking notes. I said, I think I might need this. And I started taking notes, and I did my note taking there. And this went on for like 5 minutes. And then the CEO said, can you tell me exactly what they said? And the whole board looked at me, because the whole board was Brazilian actually. And they were like, oh, she's a fellow Brazilian. She's not going to tell us, off. And I said, yeah, no problem. I got my notes, and I said, oh, this one, call that one, this and that. And I did a consecutive, which I was only able to do because I practice that constantly. And the story tells you that deliberate practice doesn't need a partner. I mean, you know your weaknesses and you can practice by yourself, right? So that's pretty much it. They were fired, by the way.
I'll tell my funny story very quickly. But the lesson is deliberate practice is good to teach you how to get off automatic pilot. And I was translating from from English into Portuguese, talking about the triple champion of of some very big important race, and some huge triathlon and Ironman, and he had won it 3 times, and he's talking about his whole everything he's doing, and he says, and I was in the zone, which for an athlete means I was totally concentrated, right in the zone, and I just translated it word for word into Portuguese, which means I was where the prostitutes are. And so, of course, the whole room breaks out in laughter. The speaker can't figure out why everyone's laughing at him. I had to stop the interpreting, explain the mistake I had made, apologize for the mistake, and then go back. And that was a very, very embarrassing lesson into why you need deliberate practice so you don't turn on automatic pilot.
That's pretty good. Does anybody else have a funny story? Or I guess we are short on time. Okay, well, Danielle, I don't think you've had too much opportunity to talk. Do you want to just quickly talk about our social media and then close the session?
Of course. No, nada más para terminar, nos gustaría decirles que muchísimas gracias por, por habernos invitado a la sesión. Sabemos que se está transmitiendo por todo el mundo, gracias a la magia de la tecnología. Y gracias también a la magia de la tecnología, nos pueden seguir en todas nuestras redes sociales. Tenemos Twitter, Instagram, Facebook y también LinkedIn. Y si se quieren divertir un poco, pueden escuchar nuestras listas de reproducción que están en Spotify, simplemente las buscan. Y también tenemos un canal de YouTube donde subimos los discursos que grabamos durante las sesiones. Así que si por algún motivo no se pueden conectar a toda la sesión, los discursos están disponibles en YouTube. Tenemos un canal de YouTube y ahí pueden encontrar los discursos de la sesión 1 y la sesión 0, porque tuvimos una sesión 0. La sesión 2 estarán en un futuro no muy lejano disponibles en Internet. Tenemos también un código QR, si le pueden escanear el código QR. No me pregunten cómo se escanea un código QR porque no es de mi generación. Yo quiero ser millennial, pero no me da para tanto. Y nada más. Muchísimas gracias por tenernos paciencia.
No, al contrario, muchísimas gracias a ustedes. En nombre del Consejo Directivo del CEMELTI, Colegio Mexicano de Licenciados en Traducción e Interpretación, agradecemos enormemente su participación, su generosidad y bueno, haber compartido con nuestra audiencia no solo acerca de su proyecto, sino además pues muchas experiencias reales y por qué no, un poquito también de anécdotas entre simpáticas y, ¿no? Entre simpáticas y trágicas. Lugares, bueno, también, como decía, no es la última ponencia del día pues bueno, ha ayudado también a que nos riésemos un poquito más. Queremos cerrar con algo o de otra forma, esto sería ya nuestro cierre. Agradecerles, reiterar ese agradecimiento. Nos vemos en redes. Muchísimas gracias y hasta la próxima. La audiencia ya tiene sus datos de contacto. Pues bueno, muchas gracias. Feliz Día del Traductor e intérprete también para ustedes, todos y cada uno de ustedes. Un fuerte abrazo.
Chao, nos vemos.
Merci. Obrigada.